Hello, good morning, hello, good afternoon, hello, good evening, and welcome to today's PhUSE webinar. I'm Stephen Bamford, and I'm here today to talk you through the agenda and then just give a very brief overview of what's happening at PhUSE. So the agenda today, you've got to listen to 5 minutes of me, and then Katia is going to give a summary of the EU Connect conference that was very successful earlier this month, although it feels a lifetime ago. Anders will then talk about the cloud adoption project. Jeff will talk about FIRE and an update on clinical research, and Jane will talk about the CSDRG. So without further ado, I'll give an update only for a few minutes on what's been happening at PhUSE and with the board of directors. The first thing to do is to remind everyone that we're now only 3 months away, 12 weeks away from the US Connect. I know we had the last one in June, but that was due to scheduling issues. So from now on forward, from 2019 onwards, it will be in March. This is the last week of February, but bordering into March. And so we've got over 300, it's actually about 350 now registered to date. Every time we put the slides together, they're out of date. We've got the poster evening on the Tuesday night, Sunday night. We've got the gala dinner on the Monday night, and there's an optional poker night on the Tuesday night as well. So your entertainment is taken care of. We got two excellent keynote speakers. Stephen Hausman, who's he's basically an expert in emerging technologies. When he was at the NIH, he took paper grant applications to scanned images. And he also implemented a completely paperless ethics submission and review process. So he's basically, as I said, an expert in emerging technologies, and he's going to talk about the future of data and the future of how technology can help. And then we're also honoured to have Dr. Adapur from the FDA. She's the principal deputy director, and she looks after things like health informatics and data mining, amongst other topics at the as part of CEDA. And previously, she was the director of pharmacology therapies, and that led her to do a lot of work on substance abuse and mental health services. So she's going to talk to us about some of the concepts and some of the work she did, including safe opiate prescribing and medication-assisted treatment. So it's fascinating because she's won several awards in the last 12 months as well, given her work. But this is happening at the end of February in Baltimore. I hope it looks like that, but you never know, do you, with the weather in Baltimore. But I'm sure it'll be fine. But here's a bit of news for you all. Buy now, pay later. So we're coming towards the end of the budget year. Some companies have budgets that they're looking to spend. Other companies, people have to wait until January the 1st. But here's an opportunity for you. If you register by contacting the office at PhUSE.eu email address, if you register by December 22nd, we'll raise the invoices on the 2nd of January for you with 30-day payment terms. So you can go ahead and register now, but you'll be invoiced as if you were registering next year. So more information available on the PhUSE website about that. As I said, this is in February, and you can see that there's been a switch. So the CSS, which used to be in March, is now being pushed back to June. That's basically to allow better timing between all the different events. So registration for the CSS starts at the end of January. So there'll be more information going on the website during January, but again, this event is capped at 300 people as usual, given first of all the venue, but secondly the fact that it's a working group meeting, not a sit down and listen to presentations. So we've marched on from Frankfurt, and in Europe, where next stop on the European tour is Amsterdam in the Netherlands, and this event is going to be 10th of November. Michael Harris and Sophie Beck are the chair and co-chair. So at the moment, things are lining up. The committee is putting together the streams. Over 60% of the sponsorship and exhibition area has already been sold. There's more information on the website, but call for papers is likely to open same sort of time as usual, March, April. So watch this space and watch out for those emails to tell you more about the conference in the Netherlands. As you know, single day events, they happen around the world and around the year as well. So actually this Friday is a South African single day event in Bloemfontein. It's the second time we've been to South Africa, and that's the last single day event of the year this year. And then basically there's a bit of a hiatus in January and February, and then there's 3 in March, one in each region actually, one in America, one in the Netherlands, and there's one in India as well. So so the 2019 single day events, and of course the slide there should say November 2018, not 2019. Apologies for that. So March 2019 starts the 2019 single day events, and there's going to be 21 of them next year all around the world. For the working groups, there are 2 projects looking for volunteers. You can read it yourself, but it's best practices in quality control and validation, and also GPP and macro development. So more information is available on the PhUSE website, and you can click through to these links when the slides get shared. And there's 2 white papers currently out for feedback at the moment, clinical trial data as RDFs, and a script metadata recommendation white paper as well. So again, go to the PhUSE website and you can follow through the links there, and we'll share the links later on as well. So finally, just to let you know that next week the PhUSE newsletter comes out, and as a push to try and be a little bit more environmentally friendly, we're moving to an online platform. This has happened over the last 6 months. So the last PhUSE news was a PDF copy, but this one's actually a purpose-built newsletter website, sub-website. So that comes out on Monday. So I think it's going to be announced in the monthly mailing, which will be with you sometime on Monday. So take a look at that, and your feedback is greatly appreciated. You should be able to view it on tablets, phones, as well as computer desktops. So finally, just want to remind you that in 2 weeks' time, there's another webinar, same time on the Wednesday, 12th of December. Unfortunately, you've got to listen to me again, but also listen to Scott about working groups and Frank about membership. And then straight from Frankfurt, one of our key speakers, Luke Slyman, really hit a strong note with the audience regarding his school in the bag project. So he's going to come in and speak regarding that as well. So I know it's December. I know we try and cut down on meetings, but if only to listen to Luke rather than me, I'd definitely recommend that you come and join the webinar. So without further ado, Lauren's going to grab the slides from me, and she's going to pass over to Katja, who's going to talk more in detail about what happened in Frankfurt.
Yes, so welcome to the EU Connect summary. My name is Katja, and I had the pleasure to lead the conference this year. It's amazing how it's already been over. We had been in Frankfurt, which is a great city. It has been a really nice conference area where we had been. We'd been in the Cup Europa, which was really a perfect location. We had enough place for our 660 participants, and the conference center has been really bright, so it's been really nice. We started on Sunday with this poster session and also the welcome event. We had 26 posters, which had been available throughout the complete conference. And next to our traditional Sunday poster session, we had a second session on Tuesday, which was during the break and was very well received. People had much more time to look into the posters and then could come back to the poster presenter and ask questions at a later time point. So this was really much appreciated. We also had 3 very diverse and excellent, fascinating keynote speaks. The first one was Kirk, and he gave really a humorous introduction to big data and data science. So for example, you might say that red and blue socks are identically, as apart from the color, all attributes are identical, but finally it all relies on your viewpoint. So depending on how you look into your data, the knowledge gain out of this might be very different or even false. So we need all kind of viewpoints. So this was my main takeaway from Kirk's speak. On Tuesday, already mentioned from Stephen, we heard Luke Simon about the School in the Back initiative. It's really difficult for children in poor areas to go to school without any material. Just think about mathematics without being able to write anything down. Even something trivial like a lunchbox can make a difference. Children can bring their own food and then they don't need to walk home for lunch, which is more often than 1 hour away, which typically resulted in not coming back to school in the afternoon. So it's just amazing how tiny things can really change life. So at the PhUSE conference itself, we had been able to pack 430 school bags, which was really a very excellent number. And his speak was very, very great because you really can see the stories and you can see the life of these children and what these bags bring for them. So it's been really amazing. And we also will hear him next in the next webinar. I really was just flashed by him. It was really, really great. On Wednesday, we had Emma Lawton. She's a Parkinson's disease patient, and it's been really amazing that the talk she's given. It's incredible how she finds her way with this very horrible disease. She managed to stay an optimistic person and is now helping others and making people aware of this disease, figure out the patient's need and help wherever she can with initiatives and awareness. So hopefully science will provide us with much better insights into the disease, and hopefully we can also find ways to enhance the patient's life much better. She really told us about her life, her experiences, and also about her web blog, and it's really been very fascinating route she shows us. So it's also very, very great. Then the core of our conference had been also the presentations. We had 143 presentations in total in 16 different streams. So we were running 5 sessions in parallel, and also in parallel to the hands-on workshop and leadership stream. The content ranged from introductory presentations to presentations covering real business use cases like data mapping or missing data handling. So the rooms were also very nicely crowded, especially the new machine learning stream, which attracted many people. The new analytical risk-based monitoring stream was also well received. But the most successful stream this year was the data standards and governance streams, which is traditionally also the main working field for most of our PhUSE community participants. This room was filled with more than 150 people. We really need close collaboration and experience sharing to prepare best for our future requirements and possibilities. So the 660 participants of our conference really seem to enjoy the variety and mixture of topics and presentations. So they really just enjoyed it. We are also very proud to provide free workshops for our conference participants. This year we had workshops around R, CDISC, linked data, and machine learning. I've been in the machine learning workshop, which was also very much appreciated as it was extremely interactive. So in this machine learning workshop, the participants programmed a machine learning algorithm with really learning by doing. Also, the other workshops went really well together with the management stream. So finally, the agenda and what you had the chance to look was very diverse and prepares us better to challenge the changes of the future. Finally, if you look at the organization of the conference, it's been quite some people organizing the conference. We had 39 committee members and an additional planning committee, which encourage people for paper submissions, do the paper selection, and manage also their streams. And these people are all volunteers, so they're all doing it because they have the passion to support PhUSE and because they see that this exchange and collaboration brings us much forward. And then you can have a look at all the presenters we have. It's more than 200 presenters, so I really admire the huge engagement from all involved. Most are supported by their companies, which understand the huge importance to share and collaborate, especially in our technical clinical area, where we can share the experiences, processes, and principles to prepare for the future. We really have here a huge chance to share our experiences. And it's great that we had this PhUSE conference, which was running really, really well. So thanks to all involved in the conference. So I think after this conference is now over, we are even more prepared to face the challenges of the future. And in this sense, future forward, and see you at the next PhUSE event.
Thank you, Katja. Anders, are you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready. Thank you very much. First of all, I was also at the conference in Frankfurt, and it was a great conference, so thank you also to the organizers as well. So what I would like to give you is a small status on the cloud service group, where we try to describe a framework for adoption in the regulated life science industry. So this will just be highlighted. If you please skip to the next slide, please. Yeah, just very few about the background. We started off back in 2013, so now we have worked on this approximately over 5 years. And the main topic was to describe a framework concept. So everybody, when have questions or want to know something about, especially also in PhUSE, about the cloud adoption and the technology and how to look into this from a regulated perspective, they could have a document. And we are now in version 3 of the concept paper, and actually version 4 is now under revision. And we also now split it up so it could be more supportive in different appendixes, so it's a little bit more easy to update. This is about terminology, audit activities, case stories, and then also regulated requirements to cloud solutions. So these will be appendixes to the version 4 that we expect. If I should be very honestly, I think it will be in Q1 next year. Okay, please, next slide. So one of the things we need to be aware of is when we're discussing all of this about cloud solutions, and there are many people discussing this, making papers about this, but very few is aware that there are 4 key roles to be aware of. So this is some of the key roles we focus on we did it in version 3, we also do it now in version 4. That is the customer, called the cloud service customer. It's quite easy to understand what that is. Then we have the cloud service provider, and the cloud service provider is of course also, for example, a person or a company who delivers infrastructure as a service, or also applications, SaaS solutions. And then we have the broker, and this is maybe a little bit more interesting to look into that and what we'll do in the version 4, because the broker is a person or a company who combine different services into one service. And by the way, you could also be a cloud service provider that also is a broker, so you outsource some of the elements. And then we have the cloud auditor who goes in and conduct the audits. So these are 4 key roles to be aware of, and we will try to let this fit into our document where we discuss different topics and what to be aware of. Yes, next slide, please. So the key issues right now, when we looking on the trend in cloud solutions, and we talk about life science, first of all, availability of data and data integrity. That's you could say key issue right now. Honestly, if I look on this from a personal perspective, this is not new, but it seems that the industry is more and more aware of this. So of course we also focus on this in version 4. Then also it seems to be an issue right now, trending about how to facilitate compliance with critical rules in relation to supply assessment audits. We see more and more that cloud service providers do not allow or just support with documents on if a supply assessment should be conducted. So it could be quite challengeful unless you are a huge cloud service customer. Then normally you could have access. But if you're a small company, it is some challenge to go into conduct a supplier assessment on an audit of a service provider. And then how should the contract look like? It seems that the contract from an operation point of view is also an issue. So we will also elaborate a little bit about that in our version 4. And then inspection readiness. We can see right now that the inspectors starting asking about not only what is the contract, how do we conduct surveillance between the cloud service customer and the broker and the cloud service provider, but also if they want to have some objective evidence, documented evidence for something, then how can we be sure that cloud service providers are inspection ready to support with documentation or other information? Okay, so that is key issues right now that we also look into the document in the version 4 and the related appendixes. Next slide, please. So this is just some few bullets when we talk about availability of data and data integrity. Of course, one of the topics is data loss. So what are we going to do if we lose all our data? I know many people say, yes, you have a contract in place, but if you have lost your data, you can have a contract in your hand, but it doesn't necessarily give your data back. Then there could also be malicious insiders. How can we avoid that somebody inside on the supplier side, that they maybe do something about the data and so on. Then we of course have interfaces and API calls to different solutions, and of course an old discussion but still relevant, where is all the data actually going to be physically located? There are some regulations as well. So again, how can we trust, despite that we have a contract, that actually the cloud service provider will fill this kind or this part of the contract? And then from an IT perspective, the change management part. So if a cloud service provider or the broker change something in the setup, change functionalities, how is the cloud service customer involved in this? What is expected despite what is stated in the contract or now? So this is some of the wording we have discussed and we expect to be included in version 4. Next slide, please. And then the supplier assessment, elaborating a little bit about that. Very often, cloud service providers, or brokers, they send the SOC 2 report to companies, to the cloud service customer who wants to conduct an assessment or an audit of the cloud service provider. Just to be aware that the SOC 2 report is looking on the security and is more focusing, or very often focusing also on data centers. That's great, but it's do not cover necessarily everything about quality. The same, it seems also that many big cloud service providers also send the ISO 27001 report conducted by a third party. But as is stated here, it only covers security. So ISO 9000 about requirements for a quality management system is still not covered. Next slide, please. So we just have to be aware that if a cloud service customer decides to conduct an assessment based on third-party reports and they only log into SOC 2 and 27001 reports, then there will be actually many clauses from a quality perspective that is not necessarily included in these reports. And this have, of course, to be taken into consideration when the cloud service customer make an assessment from a risk perspective, if an on-site audit is needed or not. Next slide, please. So the final part was about inspection readiness. So first of all, the quality responsible is the same independent if we outsource or using cloud solutions. So if a cloud service customer decides to outsource something or using a cloud solution, the quality responsibility do not move. Maybe there will be a small split, but the quality responsibility is still quality responsible. So it is also today expected to have support under inspection. So if there are any issues during an inspection and we need some log files or we need some documentation how something is tested or installed, then we must expect that a cloud service provider are able to support the cloud service customer. So we also, when we look into inspection readiness, we need, of course, to prepare the relevant questions, as always, for data locations, access control, backup, how is backup routines installed, how are they validated, tested, and all this. And as we know already now, many inspectors have started asking, how do you monitor that what is stated in your contract on the cloud service customer side? How do you monitor that actually by surveillance that this contract is well implemented? Next slide, please. So the next step right now, as I mentioned, the version 4 is under final revision. We expect this realistically in Q1 2019. The 4 appendixes, the cloud terminology is very, very close to be ready for internal review in our working group. The cloud audit activities is under final revision. The cloud case stories, we still might need some input so we can see how have different cloud service customers taken care of the regulated requirements from industry and authorities, but also how have cloud service providers or brokers implemented and fulfill that everything is fit for intended use. And then we will also have an appendix, as mentioned, about the regulatory requirements, cloud solutions, and it's very, very close to internal review. So that's the status right now, what we're looking forward. Next slide, please. And this is the end of the presentation. I got 10 minutes, and I think this are fulfilled. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Anders. I'll just pass over to Jeff. Jeff, you're still on mute. If you could unmute, that'd be great.
Okay. Hi. Can you see my first slide?
Yes, thank you.
Welcome, everybody. I'm going to give the update for the Research on Fire Working Group. And first off, I just want to give a little background of our project. So our group formed at a computational science meeting at request of FDA, given their interest in real-world evidence and electronic health records. And so our group initially is interested in investigating the use of FHIR for clinical research. So FHIR is a standard for exchanging healthcare information, or typically information stored in electronic health records. And this is of increasing interest from regulatory authorities. And our initial project, FHIR is a standard for provider data or electronic health record data. We were interested, could research data be represented in FHIR? Could we get data out of electronic health records and we could represent it in FHIR? And then could we bridge the gap between provider data and research data? So in the world of research, CDISC is the standard. So could we harmonize FHIR with CDISC standards? So those were some of our initial goals. And our group up to now has produced 2 papers, both of which were presented at PhUSE annual conferences. And we're currently working on a third paper, which I'll talk about, which we're going to present in Baltimore in February. So for our first paper, really was at the kind of initiative of Dr. Zoff from FDA, and she had a real issue she wanted us to look into. So it was a good opportunity to test out FHIR. So she was interested in diabetes, and so the questions or research issues for this project was, could we get typical data for a diabetes research? Is this data actually out there in an electronic health record? Is it usable for research? Could we represent this data in FHIR? And then how well does FHIR map to CDISC? So we then try to map FHIR to CDASH and then SDTM. We generated CDASH compliant CRFs, and eventually we mapped the FHIR data to SDTM. And for this project, it's worth mentioning, we used a synthetic database that approximated the population of Massachusetts, but all the data was realistic as far as disease and demographic profiles for the population in Massachusetts. So these were our goals, and I feel like we met our goals, and we were successful. We were able to map most of the data points from FHIR to CDISC standards, and there was a handful that we couldn't map, and there was some data like adverse events which aren't really FHIR ready, which need further explanation. And I think one of the biggest things we also learned is the world of provider data and the world of research or CDISC data use a lot different terminologies. For example, labs and vitals and ECG were represented in LOIC in the FHIR or provider side, where in CDISC we really don't use LOIC. On the provider side, they use SNOMED. We use PhU and MEDRA on the research side. So what came out of it is a lot of work that we need to continue doing. But we learned a lot about FHIR in our first pilot. And the other thing we're learning is all the processes used for this project we did everything manually. So this led to our second paper. As I said, for paper one, everything we did was a manual process. So we realized this isn't really scalable, and we kind of need some more automated processes. So paper two, we kind of replicated paper one, except we automated it. And what we did is we wanted to develop an automated process where we can extract data from the electronic health record and then take that data and populate an EBC database, maybe something like Medidata. So Sam Yoon kind of designed a process, and what we did for this project that was different than the last, we automated it. So we used the combination of the FHIR APIs, and we also used the new version of CDISC ODM and a handful of new ODM APIs. And what we were able to do is using the FHIR APIs with some of the new ODM APIs and CDISC share is we were able to automate mapping the FHIR data to its CDASH counterparts, and then we were able to kind of go out and make automated calls to an electronic health record, return that data as FHIR, and then convert it back to ODM XML format and populate eCRFs. So this project was successful in automating what we did in paper one, but we now have a scalable automated process. And also we demonstrated the use of the FHIR REST APIs as well as the new ODM v2 APIs. So that was paper number two. And then our current project, which we're working on, we're going to present in Baltimore. And it still is a work in project. We had this idea as we wanted to test the feasibility of going right to EHR, right from EHR to analytics. That is, no converting to CDASH, no converting to SDTM. So we have two ways we're looking at this. One way is to go right from electronic health records right to analytics. Second way is to go from the electronic health record and produce atom analysis data sets, and then we could generate analytics / reports right from the atom data sets. At this point, we think that's a better alternative because the electronic health record data will need some massaging, will need some derived variables, things of that nature, so that we can produce reports. And what our goal is to use the APIs to automate, as we did in paper number 2, grabbing the fields we want using the FHIR APIs, and then we'll fire off a program that converts the FHIR formatted data and creates a couple of atom analysis data sets, and from there we'll generate some near real-time analytics and alerts. And the impetus for doing this, of course, is to make safety data available more real-time. Typically, in a clinical trial, data gets entered on paper, data gets entered into an electronic health record. I've heard sometimes it's 6 weeks till it all gets entered into the EDC. So we feel like this is a framework to get near real-time analytics and can improve access to safety dashboards. In the end, we can improve patient safety. And again, we're going to present this at the PhUSE Connect in Baltimore. Just wanted to mention that we are also looking for volunteers, and we have a great group and a great team, so I encourage everybody, plug to volunteer. Our team meets every other Wednesday from 10 to 11 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. And that's not right. My slide's wrong. We meet from 11 to 12. We meet right after this call. Our group leader is Tricia Simpson, and Lauren White from PhUSE is our organizer that keeps us all in line and keeps everything going. And that's all I got. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff. Just hand it over to
Can you see my screen?
yes.
All right. Thank you. I'm trying to reduce this. I apologize.
Oh, okay.
So I can put it in presentation mode. Thank you. Welcome, everyone. I am going to be giving you an update on the clinical SDRG and what is now different in the template and the other deliverables. The project leads, I was also working with Lisa Brooks on this project and would like to give her credit and kudos for helping out with this project. A little bit of background. There is a project called the Legacy Data Conversion Planning Report project that we've actually been working on for a few years now. And that involved updating the clinical SDRG and the ADRG templates per the technical conformance guide that indicates what should be in a legacy data conversion planning report and where it should be located. There can be conversions on the SDTM side, and there can be conversions from the ATOM side as well. That's why the project is updating the clinical SDRG and ADRG templates and their associated deliverables, along with updating the template to be in alignment with the TCG. These two templates have not been updated in several years, and as we were working on it, we also wanted to be able to incorporate the changes in the TCG and to have the templates to be in alignment. I've worked with several people that have done this themselves in their own clinical SDRGs and ADRGs. They've gone ahead and made changes per the TCG, but we wanted to make sure that the template was in alignment so that FDA will get a consistent document and not something different from sponsor A versus sponsor B. We have just finished putting the clinical SDRG deliverables actually on the PhUSE site. There was a public review period that is over. I am happy to say that the deliverables for the clinical SDRG are now published on the PhUSE EU site under the regulatory referenced deliverables, and it is version 1.3. And you can go out there and now get that template and the associated deliverables as well. We are still working on the ADRG. Hopefully by the beginning of next year, that will go out for public review. What is involved in the clinical SDRG updated deliverables is the template, version 1.3. The completion guidelines were also updated. There were 3 already existing example documents. Those were updated to be in alignment with the technical conformance guide. We created 2 new example documents to show an example of a legacy data conversion. And then also we created a document, and Lisa did a great job on this, of creating a document to show the conversion data flow and a traceability data flow. That is something that is part of the appendix. And we wanted to create this document as a way to help others as you're creating it as well, and to once again have a consistent format in how these flows are documented in the SDRG. From a high level, one of the things that we did was everywhere we could, we added clinical to the first page. We added the template date on the first page. That wasn't there. So now our deliverables that we have, like the SDSP and then the ADRG, will also do this. But FDA wants to know, what version of the template did you use? And this will be the date, the template date. We associate the date and the version as synonymous, but that will be on the first page. Any clinical SDRGs now that get created should have the date of the template on that first page. Added clinical to the header. We wanted to make sure that this was clinical. There is a non-clinical SDRG. That is not the part of the working group that Lisa and I work with. There's a separate non-clinical group. They keep their own SDRG. That's why we wanted to put clinical throughout this document so that it is not misunderstood and that we know specifically that this is related to clinical. And then also adding an appendix for the legacy data conversion plan and report. Obviously, if you're creating an SDRG and you have not gone through any type of legacy data conversion, that appendix can be deleted. It is not needed. However, if there was a conversion that was done, then this appendix will be used to describe, per the TCG, the information about the conversion. It's a very generic appendix because we know that all conversions are different. Every study is different, but the example documents will give you a feel for the type of information that FDA is looking for when you document the legacy data conversion. Some of the specific sections that we changed was section 1.1. We wanted to make sure that if there is a legacy data conversion plan and report, that there is verbiage, there's standard verbiage that you can use. Added some new acronyms for the data flow diagrams. We also, throughout this document, added verbiage to not delete a section, because what will happen if you delete a section, then the sections get renumbered. That results in inconsistent documents being sent to FDA, and we got the feedback that they did not like that. If you have a section that you don't have anything for, just put in the verbiage that indicates that there's nothing for that section. In section 2.3, once again, every time we saw SDRG, we put a C in front of it to ensure that everyone knows we're talking clinical. Then in section 3.1, there's verbiage for it. There's also information for adjudication data per the TCG, added a C before the SDRG. Section 3.2 is a new section to show a traceability flow diagram, which I have seen being used at other companies. Now it's officially part of the template. Now, if you're doing a legacy data conversion plan and report, you can put verbiage in there that will be shown in the appendix. You don't need to put in a traceability flow diagram in this section. However, if you're creating the reviewer's guide for SDTM data, then you would want to put in a traceability flow diagram. There's an example in the completion guidelines. Then we added a table for data not submitted in section 3.3, which was previously 3.2, because once again, these numbers will change. Section 3.4, which was 3.3, we got feedback that reviewers wanted to see whether a data set is a custom data set, and then also received the feedback that the observation class column wasn't really meaningful to them, and that was removed. In section 4.1, made it more generic, because now we know OpenCDisk is Pinnacle 21, and we want to make that more generic so that we don't have to keep changing our template every time the software changes. At section 2, we can include a text or a table, and then even in section 4.3, to not delete the section. Once again, we do not want sections to be renumbered. This is, I think, the last section of the template. Even so, it is part of the template. Just put in a sentence that you have nothing else. There's nothing to be put into this section. Here is an example of what is in our traceability data flow document. And I apologize, it's kind of small, but it is out there on the PhUSE site with the deliverables. We outline the reviewer's guides that could possibly be needed. Not saying you have to do this, but this is suggestions. It shows a conversion data flow. This is showing that you had a study that legacy tabulation was used to create your legacy analysis and then your output, but then there was a conversion done, and the legacy tabulation data was used to create SDTM. Notice the arrows in the conversion data flow are all going forward. From a traceability, they want to know everything that's happening with this data. It is very similar to the conversion, but you can see that the arrows are going back and forth where that traceability is, but it's also showing what's happening to the rest of the data. That SDTM is going into a pooled SDTM in the first example, then it's going to a pooled atom and output results. In the second one, it's going straight to a pooled atom. We're not describing any of the pooling in the clinical SDRG. There would be a separate SDRG for that pooled, as you can see in the first column. But we got the feedback also that reviewers wanted to see the whole thing. Where is this data going? How do you trace it back from collection all the way to output, and what was converted when you had to do that conversion? In some cases, there will be just a clinical SDRG with the legacy data conversion. In other cases, you will have an ADRG as well if you took your analysis, your legacy analysis data, and converted that into ATOM. The 3 scenarios are in the TCG, and we try to address all 3 scenarios and have examples as well showing those scenarios. That is, once again, out on the regulatory referenced deliverables out on the PhUSE site. You will see it out there as version 1.3 for the template and the associated documents. If you have any questions as you're going through this and using the new template, please feel free to contact Lisa, myself, or Wendy, and we would be happy to assist. Thank you.
Thank you, Jane. Thank you everyone for joining the webinar. As Stephen said at the beginning of the webinar, we have another one running in 2 weeks' time. All of the presentation slides and recording can be found on the PhUSE website, so we'll be working away to upload those within the next day or so. Thank you all for joining, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.